Hey, this is Alex Yoder with Pro Tip Tuesday, my favorite day of the week. And today I'd like to talk about legislation. Now, I try to keep these videos pretty brief because I don't know about you guys, but if somebody talks more than about 5 minutes, I'm going to tune out and probably not finish the video. So we try to keep it pretty short and sweet. The real in-depth conversation and the dialogue occurs in the Colorado Springs Landlord Forum Facebook page, so we can have actual deeper conversations about kind of some of the challenges that we're dealing with. Now, what I wanted to touch on with legislation today was just a couple really quick things. Number one, there are a bunch of bills that have been kind of forced through in this last week through the legislature on a state level that us property managers and landlords are going to have to learn how to live with, because they were passed through and are on the way to the governor's desk to be signed. We don't anticipate that for any reason they wouldn't be signed. So we're looking at a bill on immigration status, basically meaning that when you are screening somebody for an application, you cannot inquire or have their immigration status in any way impact their approval or denial of the property. You can still ask for basic stuff, and I'll go into more detail in future videos and in posts on the Landlord Forum, but you can still ask for the normal stuff like Social Security number or an ITIN number if that's your normal procedure to verify credit and that sort of thing. But you can't specifically ask what their citizenship status is. So that's one thing. We thought that bill was killed a couple weeks ago, but it actually came back and pass. The second thing is source of income being a protected class on a state level. That's already passed in Denver, but on a state level, it's looking like source of income is going to be protected. Basically, what that's going to mean for us landlords is we cannot blanket say no to tenants who are getting government assistance for housing, such as Section 8 tenants. We can't just blanket say no to those folks. There are some exemptions for owners who own under a certain number of doors, and I'll go into more detail on that when the bill actually gets signed. But generally speaking, that's what we're looking at, and I think that one's going to be kind of coming into effect the beginning of January. Some of these are coming into effect immediately as soon as they're signed. Others are coming into effect the beginning of next year. Now, again, in that bill, my understanding is that we can still require certain credit scores and that sort of thing. So many of the folks who fall under federal assistance for housing wouldn't qualify anyway, but doesn't sound like this bill is wanting you to blanket say no to people who are getting assistance for their housing. There's also a bill on collections, which is somewhat, you probably won't be impacted much by it as it pertains to COVID and sort of a delay in the ability to collect balances. So I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail on that. And then it sounds like there's a rent assistance bill coming out for renters, but also for property owners, where there's a situation where rent can't be paid because of COVID. Again, we'll continue to post about all of this stuff and all the details of these bills as they get signed on the Landlord Forum page. The last bill that I really wanted to touch on just for a minute here was the governor's order that just came out that basically prohibits late fees from being charged from the beginning of May through the 13th of June, but also extends the standard 10-day notice period to cure or quit a non-payment infraction on the lease, extends that to a 30-day notice instead of a 10-day. So the tenant would have a 30-day period to cure or quit. Now, I don't believe that particular governor order is going to have a huge impact either, because the CARES Act is still in effect, which is not allowing us to post for non-payment until the end of July anyway for those properties that are covered properties. So we actually just had Ken Davidson, who's an attorney, a great attorney down here in Colorado Springs, who works closely with Colorado Springs NARPM and our chapter, kind of touch on that bill and basically indicated that yes, the CARES bill still effectively, is still applicable. And so if you have a property that is covered under the CARES Act, federally backed or owned loan, you still would have to follow the guidelines of the CARES Act, which still restricts late fees and posting for non-payment to proceed towards eviction. So if you had a property that is not covered by the CARES Act, maybe it's free and clear, you own it outright, or it's some other smaller loan, smaller bank local loan that's not federally backed or owned, then instead of falling under the CARES Act provisions, you're basically going to fall or look towards this governor's order. Now, beyond that, you of course would look towards state law, the court systems here, city laws and the court systems here, and then also the sheriff's department. It sounds like the sheriff's department is going to start enforcing evictions again. It sounds like they're getting some assistance to work through the backlog of what's about over 100 and some odd evictions that are on file that are backlogged right now. But it sounds like the sheriff's department is enforcing those, and it looks like the courts in Colorado Springs will start to open back up so we can actually proceed with those particular evictions, or evictions that have nothing to do with non-payment. If there's an eviction that needs to occur for other reasons, other lease violations, where you could potentially get an eviction, it sounds like those things are starting to roll again. So really, the moral of the story is stay connected, join the Colorado Springs Landlord Forum if you're not already a member, and kind of stay tuned as we continue to update these things. It seems like our world and the legislation that we're dealing with is changing every other day. And so what I say today may not be applicable tomorrow. And I try to convey as best I can what the attorneys are advising for us to move forward. But as always, and I've said this a million times, you should have an attorney on speed dial if you are a landlord, and you should be only leaning on an attorney perspective before you take any sort of real action as it pertains to your relationship with the tenant or heading into the courts. So that is all for today. Alex Yoder, Dorman Real Estate Management Pro Tip Tuesday. We will see you next week.